Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really intense character study from classical literature. We're going to be unpacking one of the absolutely most consequential moments in the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata. Basically, we're taking a magnifying glass to the anatomy of a truly fatal decision.
And it really begs a fascinating question. How does an empire actually fall, right? Like, is it always lost in the heat of a glorious battle, or can it be gambled away just because of a single man's unchecked jealousy? We're going to investigate the deep psychological roots of a massive, civilization-altering conflict. And spoiler alert here, it doesn't start with swords. It starts with a deeply bruised ego and a rigged game. Section 1, the depressed prince.
So we start off by observing this highly privileged royal named Duryodhana. On paper, this guy has literally everything a prince could ever want. And yet, he is utterly, completely miserable. Now, what's really interesting about this is the staggering contrast of reality. On one hand, we have Duryodhana's father, the blind king Dhritarashtra. He takes this very logical inventory of his son's life, pointing out that, hey, he's got the best food, beautiful mansions, limitless wealth. He's basically commanding life as if you were a god. But then look at the flip side. Duryodhana literally tells his father, I eat and dress myself like a wretch. He feels completely destitute. He admits his fallen prey to this fierce jealousy. It's just a total psychological disconnect, between what he actually has and how incredibly empty he feels inside.
Section 2, an inventory of envy.
So, what exactly is causing all this intense misery? Well, to understand Duryodhana's mental state, we kind of have to quantify the overwhelming prosperity of his cousin and rival, Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira has just wrapped up this massive royal sacrifice called the Rajasuya, and the wealth on display there, it completely broke Duryodhana's spirit. Let's look at this number, 88,000. That is the number of religious scholars, or snataka brahmanas, that Yudhishthira is personally supporting. And he isn't just feeding them, he's giving each and every single one of them 30 slave girls. Right out of the gate, this sets a scale of wealth and power that is almost unfathomable, and Duryodhana had to sit there and witness it firsthand. Okay, let's dive into this list of tributes pouring in because it's just staggering. The text describes 30,000 she-camels, hundreds of thousands of elephants, and these exotic Kadali deerskins brought by the king of Cambodia. Get this, even the ocean itself is said to have brought nectar in vessels of white copper. I mean, this wasn't just your standard run-of-the-mill wealth. This was universal submission from foreign kings and from nature itself. And witnessing all this, it pushed Duryodhana into a literal physical fever of jealousy. Like, he's actually becoming physically ill from the envy.
3 billion. That's the amount of tribute, the actual wealth sitting in golden vessels, just waiting at the palace gates. Why? Because the keepers literally couldn't process it fast enough to let them in. Just put that into perspective for a second. Can you imagine standing there seeing 3 billion units of unimaginable wealth just flowing into your rival's home? It perfectly illustrates exactly why Duryodhana felt so totally eclipsed and just powerless.
But, it wasn't just visual. It was a complete sensory overload. Look at this quote from the text. My hair stood on end. So they had it arranged that every time 100,000 brahmanas were fed, conches would blow in a massive chorus to notify everyone. Duryodhana says he heard those conches blowing continually, almost nonstop. Imagine that, a constant booming auditory reminder of your rival's limitless resources. It drove him so much deeper into despair. He openly admits his heart burned and he couldn't enjoy a single moment of peace.
Which brings us to Section 3, the rigged game.
Desperation makes people highly vulnerable to dark solutions, right? Enter Duryodhana's uncle, Sakuni. He's a crucial new character in our explainer, and he offers a very sinister path forward. Sakuni zeroes in on a very specific vulnerability. He says, I will defeat him repeatedly at every throw by practicing deception. You see, Sakuni is an absolute master at the game of dice. And he knows that Yudhishthira, despite all his immense power and those billions in wealth, is deeply fond of playing dice. But crucially, he's really not very good at it. So Sakuni promises his nephew that I'll use deception to win all that unimaginable wealth without shedding a single drop of blood on a battlefield. It's the perfect targeted trap.
Section 4, a father's ultimatum. So the big question is, how do they get the king to actually agree to this blatant trap? Well, the king's first instinct is actually pretty good. He wants to consult his wise minister Vidura, who always keeps morality in mind. But Duryodhana, he resorts to extreme emotional manipulation. He totally corners his father, vowing that if the king consults Vidura, the minister is undoubtedly going to stop the plan. And if the plan gets stopped, Duryodhana says he will kill himself. He essentially tells his father, enjoy the whole earth with Vidura when I am dead. It's just a devastating, highly toxic threat.
Let's see how this builds, because faced with his son's threat of suicide, the king has a completely panicked reaction born out of absolute fear. Step 1. To pacify his son, he immediately orders artificers to erect this massive, delightful 1,000-column palace covered in jewels. Step 2. He sends for the wise Vidura, but not for advice this time. He's sending for him to deliver orders. And Step 3. He commands Vidura to go and bring Yudhishthira to play the game. He's enabling his son's destructive plan entirely out of the sheer fear of losing him.
Section 5. Surrendering to fate. This brings us to the narrative climax of our explainer, the ultimate confrontation between wise counsel and willful ignorance. When the wise minister Vidura hears this plan, he immediately recognizes that Kali, meaning destruction, is at hand. He explicitly warns the king that the path to destruction is wide open and literally begs him to stop so no dispute arises between the family members. But look at the king's response. Dhritarashtra insists that if the gods are merciful, no dispute will arise. It is a desperate, entirely baseless hope. He is deliberately choosing to just ignore the incredibly obvious trap they're setting up. And then we get to this highly critical line. The king tells Vidura, I regard fate as supreme, which bringeth all this. This right here is the exact moment the king officially abdicates his responsibility as a leader and as a father. He knows gambling is evil. He knows his son is acting out of pure jealousy. He knows Sakuni plans to cheat, but instead of being a king and just saying no, he uses fate as his convenient little shield for a deeply flawed, terribly human decision. He tells his minister, tell me nothing, and just stubbornly sends him away. And that leaves us with a really provocative question. Was this disastrous event truly the inescapable hand of fate, just like the king claimed? Or was it simply the destructive power of human weakness, enabling a prince's unchecked, consuming jealousy? By analyzing this source text, we get to see the true anatomy of a fatal decision, one that was built entirely on envy, manipulation, and a massive failure of leadership. It's wild to think about how these psychological drivers mirror conflicts in our own lives and histories today, even without the golden palaces and billions in tribute. It really is fascinating how human nature operates, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this breakdown gave you a clear and powerful understanding of the text. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.